The attic window was my only connection to the living world below. Through its narrow panes, I could glimpse the valley stretching toward the castle of Haifang, its banners heavy with dew and moonlight. The rest of the manor was silent, except for the groan of old timber and the heartbeat of wind that pushed against the eaves. I had grown up in this forgotten corner of the estate, half servant, half ghost. Dust gathered around me like a second skin. Sometimes I would press my forehead to the glass and imagine the valley breathing, 1,000 wolves sleeping under roofs of slate and straw, waiting for the king's call. I was one of them, though no one was supposed to know. "Stay hidden," my stepmother had said, and for years I obeyed. But obedience had become a cage that shrank each time the moon rose. My name is Ilara, and this is my story. My earliest memory was of my mother's laughter drifting through this same window. Lady Serenia, daughter of the moonborn line, had hair the color of dawn mist and a voice that could still a storm. My father, Lord Garin of Valecrest, had fallen in love with her at first sight during a treaty gathering between packs. They said she carried the blessing of Selura, goddess of the twin moons, a light that healed and cursed in equal measure. When I was 5, the blessing turned on her. A fever of silver fire burned through her veins after she used her gift to save father from an assassin's blade. For 7 nights, she raved beneath the moons, whispering words no healer understood. On the 8th, she vanished. Some said the goddess claimed her. Others whispered she was executed in secret to keep her power from spreading. Father never spoke of it again, only locked her chambers and forbade her name. After Mother's disappearance, Father grew colder, wrapped in duty and despair. Then came Lady Maressa, a widow with soft eyes and a smile that trembled with practiced sorrow. She arrived during the first winter of famine, bringing carts of grain and servants to help rebuild. She was beautiful, clever, and everything a lonely lord might want beside him at council tables. Within months they were married, and by the following spring she ruled the manor as though it had always been hers. She brought with her 2 daughters, Celine and Maris, pretty as porcelain and twice as cruel. I remember their laughter the first day they found me practicing sword drills with one of the stable boys. "The orphan plays knight," they jeered. "You'll be lucky if you ever play servant." Father died before he could see what they made of me. The fever that took him was quick, suspiciously so. By then, Lady Maressa had woven herself through every corner of his household, every council, every purse. At his funeral, I stood alone at the back, unseen, in a plain gray cloak. She forbade me to wear mourning black, claiming it would confuse the guests. Afterward, she sent me to the attic, dismissing the servants who once watched over me. My father's crest was stripped from my clothing. Even the wolves of the estate began to growl when I passed, as if sensing the change in rule. Years blurred into one another, seasons marked only by the sound of carriages arriving for her endless feasts and her daughter's laughter echoing down the marble halls. The attic became my kingdom of silence. I taught myself to read from old tomes father left behind, maps of the LYCAN realms and journals describing the bonded court where kings chose their mates. I memorized each crest and legend until they felt like stories written in my own blood. At night, when the moonlight slid through the cracks in the roof, I could almost hear Mother's voice whispering from those pages. Sometimes the whispers grew stronger, shaping words I did not know. Child of silver, blood of flame. When they came, my heart would pound so loud I feared Maressa might hear it below and climb the stairs to silence me. It was during one of those whispering nights that I found Father's final letter, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. His handwriting was weak but deliberate. "Alara, my moonlight, if you read this, trust no one of the court. Your mother's gift sleeps within you. Should they learn of it, they will burn this house to ashes to claim it. Promise me you will live." The parchment smelled of smoke and iron. There was a brown stain near the edge that I knew was blood. I pressed the letter to my chest and wept for the first time in years. After that night, I began marking the days by the phases of the moon, counting how many until I could no longer bear my silence. Maressa, perhaps sensing my restlessness, doubled her cruelty. I was given chores meant for stable hands, beaten if a single dish remained unpolished. She told the villagers I was sick, touched by madness inherited from my mother. Rumors spread fast, that I spoke to shadows, that my eyes glowed when storms approached. Servants stopped meeting my gaze. Even the wolves avoided me. And yet when I caught my reflection in the attic's cracked mirror, I sometimes saw a faint golden ring inside my gray irises. Proof that the bloodline she feared was real. I didn't know whether to be terrified or proud. One evening, while sweeping dust from the rafters, I overheard Maressa speaking to her daughters in the hall below. "The king will host the mating ceremony under the next full moon," she said, her tone dripping with anticipation. "We shall attend, and one of you will ensure our family's rise." Celine squealed. Maris asked what would happen if the king sensed another destined mate. Maressa's answer chilled me. "Then we remove her before he finds her." Their laughter followed, brittle as shattered glass. I clutched the broom until splinters bit my palms. For reasons I couldn't name, my heartbeat matched the rhythm of the wind outside. Wild, warning, alive. That night, I dreamt of Mother standing on a field of silver grass beneath twin moons. She wore armor of light, her eyes blazing gold. "The time draws near," she whispered. "The bond will seek you, even through chains." When I woke, the scent of rain filled the attic, though the roof had not leaked in years. A low hum trembled through the air, as if the world itself exhaled. My fingertips glowed faintly, tracing sigils of light that vanished the instant I noticed them. I pressed my hands to my chest, frightened yet exhilarated. Whatever slept inside me was stirring. Days passed in a blur of dread and fascination until the night of the ceremony arrived. From the attic, I watched the manor blaze with torchlight as carriages lined the road. The banners of noble houses flapped crimson and silver against the rising moon. The sound of horns drifted across the valley, calling every eligible she-wolf to the king's court. My stepmother and her daughters descended the stairs in gowns that shimmered like spilled wine. Before leaving, Maressa glanced toward the attic door, her eyes narrowing as if she sensed the pulse of rebellion beating inside me. "Stay hidden," she hissed. "No one must see you." The lock clicked and her footsteps faded. Left alone, I moved to the window. The moon was enormous, full, bright, merciless. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered to the night, "If you truly see me, show me why." The wind rose, carrying the scent of pine and iron once more. A whisper rode upon it, soft yet commanding. "You were not meant to hide." My breath caught. Somewhere across the valley, a single thunderous howl split the air. And though I had never met him, I knew whose voice it was. The LYCAN king had heard me. The howl rolled through the night like thunder tearing open the heavens. Every window in the manor seemed to tremble with its force. I stood frozen at the attic window, breath fogging the glass, heart thrumming in answer to a sound I'd never heard, yet somehow recognized in my bones. The LYCAN King's call wasn't just a cry of dominance. It was an ancient summons. one that resonated in the blood of every wolf blessed by Salura herself. I pressed my hands against my chest, and for a heartbeat, I felt it, an answering pulse deep within me, fierce and unbidden. The air grew thick with power, heavy enough to taste. I didn't realize I was whispering until I heard my own trembling voice. He's calling someone. But the whisper that followed, unseen, uninvited, answered from the dark corner of the attic. He's calling you. I spun, heart hammering, but there was no one there, only the soft flutter of curtain fabric stirred by a draft that hadn't existed a moment ago. Yet I could feel something, and presence older than time, wrapping around me like moonlight through mist. The scent of pine and storm filled the air again, and faint silver symbols glowed across the wooden beams above my head. Runes I had never seen before, pulsing softly like veins of light. I knew then, without understanding how, that the goddess had heard me. My stepmother's warning echoed faintly, "No one must see you." But my mother's voice rose louder in my memory. "The bond will seek you even through chains." The sound of carriages rumbling down the valley reached my ears. My hand shook as I stared toward the locked attic door. My choice was simple: obey fear or follow fate. The decision burned through me before my mind caught up. I knelt by the floorboards and lifted the plank where Father's letter had once been hidden. Beneath it lay the silver cloak he had given my mother, woven with threads of moonlight and marked with her family crest, a half-moon cradling a star. I wrapped it around my shoulders, and warmth spread through me like the touch of sunlight on snow. The mirror in the corner reflected someone I scarcely recognized. My hair, once dull from dust, shimmered faintly. My skin seemed to gather the moon's glow instead of merely reflecting it. I didn't look like a servant anymore. I looked like what I was born to be, a daughter of the moon-born line. My pulse steadied. My fingers reached for the window latch. The wind answered with a howl that sounded almost like approval. I climbed down the outer wall using the ivy vines that clung stubbornly to the stone. Each movement made my palms sting, but the pull in my chest urged me onward. Below, the valley blazed with torchlight. Wolves in human form, nobles and guards were streaming toward the king's fortress, an enormous structure carved into the mountainside, its gates wrought from silver and obsidian. From this distance, the sound of drums and horns carried like a heartbeat through the forest. I reached the ground, breathless, my cloak whispering around my feet. For a moment, I hesitated. Every step forward meant betraying the command that had defined my entire life. Then I remembered the voice from the wind. You were not meant to hide. I stepped into the forest's shadow. The journey to the fortress was a fever dream of moonlight and movement. The forest seemed alive, its branches bowing as I passed, the path glowing faintly under my feet. Once I thought I saw a figure walking beside me, a woman in silver armor, her face hidden by light. When I blinked, she was gone, but the air still hummed with her presence. I reached the edge of the clearing just as the final procession entered the gates. The sight took my breath away. Hundreds had gathered, noble women in shimmering gowns, warriors in dark ceremonial armor, emissaries from distant packs. Above them all, on a terrace of stone and silver, stood the LYCAN king himself. Even from afar, I felt his aura, ancient, commanding, and burning with barely contained power. His gaze swept across the crowd like a blade of light. The moment it passed over me, my body locked in place. It was said that the LYCAN king could scent truth itself, that his senses reached beyond flesh into the soul. I had never believed such tales until that instant. The noise of the crowd dimmed, the world narrowing to the space between his eyes and mine. He was tall, dark-haired, his features hewn in the cold beauty of a predator carved by the gods themselves.
but it wasn't his face that made my heart falter. It was the way his aura flared, golden and feral, the same hue that glimmered faintly in my own eyes. For one impossible heartbeat, the bond ignited. The drums faltered. The king's nostrils flared. Then his head tilted slightly, confusion crossing his expression. He murmured something to the warrior beside him. I saw the man glance in my direction, frown, and begin to descend the terrace steps. Panic surged. I ducked behind the trunk of an oak, the cloak blending with shadow. The king's warrior scanned the clearing but saw nothing. When he turned back toward the terrace, I exhaled shakily. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. What had I done? If Marissa saw me here, if anyone recognized me, I would be ruined, or worse. But the bond's pull was stronger than fear. I could feel it like an invisible thread tugging me toward the ceremony's heart. When the herald raised his voice to announce the beginning of the choosing, my legs moved of their own accord. I slipped into the outer ring of the crowd, hidden beneath the silver hood, my gaze locked on the king. The ritual began with a procession of chosen daughters stepping forward. Each offered a token, blood, vow, or relic, to invoke the goddess's blessing. The moonlight shimmered across their forms. But when the king approached them, the glow around him dimmed, as if the very air waited for something more. Celine and Maurice were among them, their faces radiant with vanity. I watched Marissa standing proudly near the dais, her eyes gleaming with ambition. I should have felt hatred. Instead, I felt only inevitability, like a river that knew its course. When Maurice knelt and offered her vow, the king's expression didn't change. When Celine stepped forward, the torches flickered as though repelled. Then the wind shifted, the scent of pine and storm filled the air again, and the king's head snapped toward the edge of the crowd, toward me. Every sound vanished. My breath, the rustle of gowns, even the drum beats, all were swallowed by silence. His gaze locked on mine with unerring precision. "Who stands there?" his voice thundered, low yet resonant, carrying to every ear in the courtyard. Faces turned. My stepmother's lips parted in horror, her daughters froze. I wanted to run, to vanish into the trees, but my feet refused. The wind whipped my cloak open, revealing the half-moon crest gleaming faintly in silver light. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Someone whispered, "Moonborn." The king stepped down from the dais, eyes glowing gold. "Show yourself," he commanded softly, but it wasn't a threat. It was a summons older than crown or kingdom. Against all sense, I obeyed. I stepped into the open, trembling. The crowd parted instinctively, forming a corridor of stunned faces. Moonlight bathed me fully, and for the first time in my life, I didn't hide from it. The symbols that had glowed in the attic now shimmered faintly across my skin, tracing my veins with silver fire. The king's gaze softened, astonishment flickering in his eyes. He stopped an arm's length away. "Your name?" he demanded, though his tone betrayed curiosity more than command. My lips trembled as I whispered, "Alara of Veilcrest." The reaction was immediate. Marissa gasped, pale as bone. "Impossible!" she hissed. "She was forbidden!" The king turned sharply. "Forbidden?" His gaze cut to her like a blade. She flinched, eyes darting between us. "My lord, she's a servant, a mad girl. She bears no lineage worthy of your notice." But even as she spoke, my blood answered with light. The silver sigils flared brighter. The king's eyes widened in recognition. "You carry the mark of the goddess," he said, voice almost reverent. "You are the one I was meant to find." The crowd erupted, some in awe, others in fury. Marissa's daughters shrieked protests. Courtiers muttered accusations of witchcraft. The king raised one hand, and silence fell. "None shall question the will of Salura," he declared, his gaze never leaving mine. "The bond has spoken."
A golden aura pulsed from his chest, reaching toward me like living fire. My own light responded instinctively, meeting his halfway. When they touched, the air cracked like lightning. Gasps rose as the bond flared into existence, visible to every eye, undeniable. But within the glow, I saw something else, a shadow coiling at the edge of the king's aura, dark and cold. For the briefest instant I felt fear, not of him, but of what hunted him. And me. Marissa recovered first. Her mask of shock hardened into fury. "You cannot take her. She is cursed. Her mother was a witch who betrayed her own kind." The king's eyes flashed dangerously. "Then perhaps I owe her my gratitude, for her daughter has broken the curse of my bloodline." He turned to me, extending his hand. "Come, Alara of Veilcrest, stand beside your king." My legs trembled as I took a step forward, each movement echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. The moment our fingers touched, the world around us vanished into light. I heard the faintest whisper, Mother's voice, filled with both pride and warning. "You've been found, my child, but to be chosen is only the beginning." The morning after the mating ceremony broke with a light frost over the palace terraces, each blade of grass glinting like scattered shards of crystal. I followed Valric through the towering silver gates, my cloak still heavy with the scent of moonlight. Every step echoed against the polished marble floors, each reverberation a reminder of how far I had stepped from the shadows of the attic. Servants and courtiers bustled about, their faces careful facades of politeness, yet the undercurrent of whispers carried sharp edges, envy, suspicion, fear. The palace itself seemed alive, each column and archway carved with intricate runes that pulsed faintly with latent power. I felt the threads of the bond with Valric tighten as we passed through the grand foyer, golden light wrapping around us like a protective cocoon. I had expected awe, maybe even fear, but this was something entirely different. This was a world of glances and guarded smiles, of hidden daggers beneath courtesy, of power disguised as grace. My pulse quickened with both anticipation and dread. Every noblewoman's eyes swept over me, and I could feel them analyzing, judging, measuring. Some looked afraid, some looked jealous, and others stared with the curiosity of predators sizing up prey. The forbidden spark between Valric and me pulsed faintly, responding to their collective tension, to the subtle sway of intrigue that filled the air. Valric guided me through the twisting halls, the faint scent of pine and burning incense clinging to the air. "You must learn the ways of this place," he murmured, his voice low enough to reach only me. "Every step, every gesture, every word, they are weapons here." His hand brushed mine as he passed, light as a whisper, but the connection sent tremors through me. I wanted to look away, to focus on anything else, but I couldn't. Even across the distance of the great hall, his presence anchored me, a golden thread weaving through my very soul. I tried to memorize the faces that turned toward us, the Queen Mother, towering and regal, her gaze sharp as a blade, scanning my every move. She nodded subtly, a gesture heavy with unspoken challenge, and I knew that her approval would not come easily. We passed windows framing the morning sunlight, gilding Valric's dark hair and gold. Every flicker of light seemed to heighten the intensity of our forbidden connection, drawing the eyes of those around us like moths to flame. My cloak swirled around my feet, a silent banner of my newfound status, of the line I carried in my blood, and yet, behind every polite bow and muttered greeting, I could feel the undercurrent of danger, of jealousy, and of the ever-present shadow waiting at the edges of the light. The Queen Mother appeared suddenly in a side corridor, her figure tall and commanding, her robe a cascade of black and silver. "Alara," she said, voice like ice sliding across stone. Your presence here is unexpected. I bowed, heart hammering, but I could feel Valric's gaze on me, protective and urgent. I have been summoned, I whispered, voice trembling slightly, though the silver sigils along my skin pulsed with quiet power. The Queen Mother's eyes narrowed, and for the briefest moment I thought she might strike me with words as sharp as knives. Instead, she smiled, faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. Very well. You will learn quickly, or you will falter. The palace tests those it deems unworthy. I understood at once. This was no kindness, no invitation. It was a gauntlet, a challenge. I would have to navigate whispers, politics, and hidden malice while maintaining the bond that connected me to the king. Every instinct screamed that this place would attempt to break me, and yet the same bond whispered that I was meant to endure, to rise. Valric's fingers brushed mine once more, subtly, and the fire that flared between us warned the world that no subtlety would hide us for long. My first lesson came in the grand ballroom, where nobles gathered beneath crystal chandeliers, their gowns and armor sparkling with ceremonial grandeur. The Queen Mother instructed me to walk among them, to greet, to acknowledge, and to observe. Each smile, each bow, each whispered compliment was a test. I moved carefully, every footstep deliberate, every hand gesture measured. Courtiers bent low in practiced obeisance, their eyes darting for weakness. Maressa's daughters, Celine and Maris, glided past with forced smiles, their whispered malice coating the air. I could hear their thoughts almost as if they had spoken aloud. She will not survive. The king has made a mistake. That girl will be undone. I swallowed the flare of anger that rose in response, keeping my voice soft, my movements graceful. Every nerve was alert. The bond pulsed, a subtle heartbeat of gold connecting me to Valric, even as he stood just beyond the crowd, his dark gaze sweeping over me with both approval and warning. The forbidden spark between us deepened, simmering in restraint and longing, a tension that was felt, not spoken, by everyone who dared to notice. After the formalities, I was led to the private chambers of the palace, a labyrinth of corridors lined with golden tapestries depicting battles, alliances, and moonlit hunts. Each image seemed to pulse faintly as I passed, reacting to the moonborn magic coursing through me. Valric remained at my side, silent but vigilant. "They will try to manipulate you," he said, voice low and intimate, brushing against the nape of my neck as he spoke. "They will test every instinct, every word, but remember, your power is not theirs to command." I nodded, though my pulse raced, the heat of his proximity making the corridor feel too small, too suffocating, yet impossibly intoxicating. I had never felt desire and danger so entwined. Even the servants seemed to sense the tension, their steps quiet, their eyes averted as if afraid of the invisible thread that hummed between Valric and me. The palace, for all its beauty, was a living, breathing entity, filled with intrigue disguised as luxury, and I was at its very center, a flame everyone could sense, but none could touch without consequence. Dinner that evening was a display of opulence and silent war. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, exotic fruits, and golden chalices filled with spiced wine. Courtiers exchanged polite words, laced with hidden daggers. Their smiles were knives, their laughter honeyed traps. Maressa's daughters sat nearest me, forcing casual conversation, but their words dripped with venom. Valric took my hand under the table, subtle yet commanding, grounding me as the golden threads of our bond flared. Every glance from him carried multiple messages, warning, desire, and unspoken plans. I felt myself leaning into the forbidden spark, drawn to him despite the dangers. Even the servants seemed to sense the tension, their steps quiet, their eyes averted as if afraid of the invisible thread that hummed between Valric and me. The palace, for all its beauty,
was a living, breathing entity filled with intrigue disguised as luxury, and I was at its very center, a flame everyone could sense, but none could touch without consequence. Later, Veilric led me to the palace gardens, a labyrinth of hedges and moonlit fountains. The night air was cold, scented with pine and jasmine. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice low, almost reverent. "The way the palace watches, the way it tests us?" I nodded, shivering, though not from the cold. The golden bond pulsed stronger here, intertwining our presence with the very air. I could feel the invisible eyes of courtiers, the Queen Mother's silent scrutiny, and Maressa's simmering malice like a heat wave pressing against my skin. Veilric's hand brushed mine, lingering, and the forbidden spark surged into a subtle electric fire. For a heartbeat, I forgot the world, the tests, the danger. There was only him, only the pull that drew me across all boundaries, forbidden and beautiful. The moonlight caught the golden glimmer in his eyes, reflecting the light of our bond, and for a moment, the palace walls, the whispers, and the plotting seemed to fade into insignificance. Yet the palace was never idle. Whispers reached my ears even in the solitude of the gardens. Servants, courtiers, and spies carried news like blades, bits of gossip, hints of curses, insinuations about my mother's past. "Moon-born blood," one whispered, voice tight with fear. "The Queen Mother will not allow it." I clenched my fists, the silver sigils along my arms flaring faintly with energy, a subtle pulse of warning. Veilric placed his hand over mine, silencing the surge, calming the instinctive reaction. "Let them whisper," he murmured, voice dark with restrained power. "Our bond is our shield. Their envy cannot touch you while I stand by your side." The forbidden spark simmered again, a flame that refused to be hidden, and I realized that my survival here depended not only on skill and grace, but on embracing this connection that felt simultaneously perilous and exquisite. The Queen Mother summoned me before her in a chamber lined with tapestries, depicting the kingdom's history, each stitch imbued with subtle enchantments. "You have been found," she said, voice smooth as silk yet sharp as a dagger. "And yet, to survive here, you must prove yourself. The palace is a stage, child, and every actor has a role. Misstep, and the consequences will be unforgiving." Her gaze pierced me, searching, measuring. I felt the golden threads of Veilric's presence humming through me, a tether to strength I had not fully claimed. "I understand," I whispered, though my pulse rattled with tension. She studied me a moment longer, then inclined her head slightly. "See to it that your presence here inspires neither fear nor rebellion. There are forces at work you cannot yet perceive." I left her chambers with a mixture of dread and exhilaration, the forbidden spark with Veilric flaring quietly, a promise that we would face whatever tests awaited, together. Training resumed under the tutelage of the palace's finest warriors. Steel clashed, leather creaked, and magic sparked faintly in response to the moonborn energy coursing through me. Veilric stayed near, correcting my stance, guiding my movements, his hand occasionally brushing mine, sending jolts of warmth and fire through me. The forbidden spark between us was a silent language, communicated in glances, breath, and the subtle pressure of fingers. I realized how dangerously intoxicating it was, this blend of desire and restraint, power and vulnerability. My body responded instinctively, not only to Veilric's presence, but to the pulse of magic that the palace itself seemed to exude. Every movement was a test, every strike measured against unseen expectations. And I knew, without doubt, that failure was a luxury I could not afford, not with eyes like the Queen Mother's on me, not with whispers of shadow and danger creeping along the palace walls. Evening brought the first grand gala, the palace alive with flickering candlelight and golden chandeliers. Each noble carried themselves with practiced civility, their expressions artfully controlled, laughter spilling like poisoned wine into the halls. Valeric appeared at my side, his dark eyes glowing gold, his presence commanding attention without a word. The forbidden sparks surged the moment our fingers touched, the golden bond flaring subtly beneath the veneer of civility. Courtiers observed us, some curious, some envious, others openly hostile. Maressa's daughters hovered near, their whispers carrying the sting of venom disguised as compliment. Every step across the polished marble floors was a negotiation of danger and desire, power and restraint. The music swelled, and Valeric leaned close, his breath brushing my ear, whispering instructions in a language only we could understand. The dance was not only of bodies, it was a duel of wit, of perception, and of will. The palace itself seemed to lean in, observing, testing, and reacting to every subtle move. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, some in awe, some in judgment, yet I found strength in the golden thread connecting me to Valeric. The forbidden spark between us demanded careful attention. Every glance, every subtle touch was a message, an affirmation, a silent rebellion against the palace's strictures. I noticed subtle gestures, a curt nod from the Queen Mother, a raised brow from a noblewoman who sought to intimidate me, the shift of a guard as he tried to mask curiosity with duty. I moved gracefully, the silken folds of my gown swirling with every step, the silver sigils along my arms catching candlelight and pulsing faintly. Valeric guided me, his dark eyes never leaving mine, each word a tether and a warning. The night stretched on, a blur of music, laughter, and whispered threats, and yet in the midst of all, the forbidden beauty of our bond shone brighter than any pretense, defiant, radiant, and uncontainable. Maressa's plots became more obvious as the evening wore on. She orchestrated minor slights, subtle manipulations, and whispered insinuations to unsettle me. But every attempt was met with the golden tether of Valeric's presence, grounding me, amplifying my confidence. I realized that the palace was not merely a place of luxury, it was a battlefield of influence, where every smile, every word, and every gesture carried weight. The forbidden spark between Valeric and me acted as both shield and weapon, a force that drew attention and provoked envy simultaneously. Courtiers watched, sensing something extraordinary in the air, something that went beyond beauty or lineage. The moon-born legacy within me responded instinctively, subtly amplifying our connection, a signal to any who dared interfere that I was no ordinary noblewoman, and Valeric's choice was not to be questioned. The palace whispered, and we listened, a quiet understanding passing between us. By the time the final toast was made, the golden threads of our bond had become a silent storm between us, noticeable to anyone sensitive enough to see. Valeric's hand lingered near mine, though propriety kept us apart, each of his glances a promise and a warning. The Queen Mother observed with keen interest, her expression unreadable but her intent clear. I was to be tested, challenged, and observed at every turn. Maressa's daughters seethed, their subtle malice failing to mask the growing recognition that I was no ordinary girl. I realized then that the forbidden spark, the moon-born power, and Valeric's presence had not only saved me from immediate danger, they had elevated me to a position where influence, fear, and desire intermingled. I had become both a target and a prize, a lightning rod for envy and ambition. Yet within the tension, there was exhilaration, a forbidden beauty that neither whispers nor daggers could extinguish. As the final guests vanished down the marble corridors, silence settled over the palace like a held breath. Valeric guided me through a hidden archway to a secluded balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens, where silver leaves shimmered in the still air. The world below seemed distant, unreal. Only the soft rustle of night and the steady rhythm of his presence beside me felt real. The golden threads of our bond pulsed, alive and responsive, as though the moon itself had drawn us into its quiet spell. You survived the first test, Valeric said at last, his voice low and roughened by restrained emotion, a mixture of admiration and warning. But this is only the beginning. I leaned against the cold stone railing, the chill of it biting into my palms as I tried to steady the racing of my heart. He stood close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body through the night air, a warmth that unsettled and anchored me all at once. When his gaze found mine, the world seemed to fall away. The palace, the whispers, the dangerous web of deceit, all faded into a haze of silver light and breathless silence. Valeric reached out, his gloved fingers brushing against my cheek, the touch careful, reverent, as though he feared I might vanish with the mist. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and pressed a kiss to my forehead. The contact was brief, but it sent a tremor through my body, a ripple of warmth that spread through the golden bond between us like liquid fire. "Whatever comes," he murmured against my skin, his voice a vow wrapped in temptation, "you are not alone in it." The words settled deep inside me, heavier than any oath, brighter than any promise. I wanted to believe him, to reach for that forbidden certainty, but as the moonlight glimmered on his dark armor and caught in the silver threads of my hair, I knew the truth. We were standing on the edge of something neither fate nor fire could undo. The Palace of Illusions had bared its true nature, a crucible of power, temptation, and secrets that demanded a price. And there, beneath the silver gaze of the moon, with his lips still ghosting against my skin, I understood that I had already begun to pay it. The morning after the night of whispered intrigues, the palace was eerily quiet, as though it too were recovering from the storm of furtive glances and unspoken challenges. Sunlight spilled over the marble floors and gilded arches, but even the golden brilliance could not wash away the tension that lingered in every shadowed corridor. I walked beside Valeric through the palace halls, my heart still thrumming from the intensity of the previous evening. The bond pulsed subtly, its warmth a reminder that we were not alone in this labyrinth of power and deceit. Courtiers' eyes followed us, some with curiosity, others with barely contained envy, and I could feel the weight of every judgment pressing against my shoulders. The air seemed thick with anticipation, charged as though something monumental awaited me behind the walls of this palace. I had learned that the glittering facades of luxury masked layers of danger, that every smile could hide a knife, and every bow could conceal betrayal. Valeric's fingers brushed mine as we passed through the sunlit atrium, a fleeting contact that ignited a spark beneath my skin, a pulse of forbidden heat that set my senses alight. I wanted to cling to him, to lose myself in the intimacy of that bond, yet the palace demanded vigilance. Each footfall echoed like a drumbeat, signaling the start of a new trial. I realized, with a thrill mingled with dread, that survival here required both strength of spirit and clarity of mind. I had glimpsed the storm beneath the gilded surface, and I knew that the days ahead would test every instinct, every ounce of courage, and every flicker of power coursing through my moonborn Venice. Valeric guided me to a chamber filled with scrolls, relics, and artifacts of ancient power, the air scented faintly with sandalwood and candle wax. He paused before a tall, carved mirror, its surface catching the sunlight in shards of reflected brilliance. "You are moonborn," he said, voice low but urgent, "and there is more to your heritage than you yet understand. Your mother's legacy is not merely a story, it is a weapon, a shield, and a warning." I turned to face him, eyes wide, heart hammering, as his gaze held mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. The bond flared subtly, golden light rippling across our joined hands. I could sense the layers of secrecy and sacrifice, the choices made long before I existed, the dangers my mother had faced in silence. Velric's hand brushed a strand of hair from my face, a gesture so intimate it made my pulse race. "Your bloodline is ancient," he continued, "tied to the goddess Salura, to powers that even the Queen Mother dares not fully command. And your mother? She gave everything to protect you, to hide you until the moment you could step into your true place." My mind swirled with awe, fear, and longing. The weight of generations pressed down, and yet the forbidden spark between Velric and me throbbed with reassurance, a tether of golden fire and a palace filled with shadows. I understood, in that moment, that my survival depended not merely on cunning and grace, but on embracing who I truly was, on acknowledging the legacy pulsing through my veins, and on trusting in the bond that connected me to the king.
The Queen Mother summoned me shortly after, her presence chilling as the cold stone corridors reflected the sharp lines of her figure. She spoke with deliberate cadence, her eyes glittering with a mixture of appraisal and veiled threat. "Ilara," she said, "the palace observes not only your actions, but the echoes of your bloodline. Secrets lie heavy within your veins, and history whispers warnings." My pulse quickened, and I clenched my fists, trying to summon the calm I had learned to project. Velric's golden thread pulsed lightly in my awareness, his silent reassurance against the icy scrutiny. "I will prove myself," I murmured, vowing just enough to show respect while keeping my gaze steady. The Queen Mother's lips curved in the faintest of smiles, one that could have been kindness or a trap. "You will be tested, child," she said, voice smooth and cutting as glass, "not merely in skill, but in endurance and loyalty and in control. Fail, and the consequences will not be yours alone to bear." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat as the weight of her words settled. The golden spark within me responded to Velric's presence, flaring with determination, a subtle yet undeniable defiance. I understood then that this palace, with all its grandeur and intrigue, was a crucible designed to strip away pretense, to separate the weak from the powerful, the timid from the chosen. Every glance, every movement, every word would be a potential weapon or shield, and the forbidden fire between Velric and me would be both solace and danger. The days blurred into lessons, challenges, and whispered warnings. The palace became a maze of observation, each corridor a potential threat, each servant a spy, each smile a hidden blade. I learned to move with precision, to speak with layered intent, to bow without showing vulnerability. Velric remained near, guiding me with subtle touches, fleeting glances, a presence that anchored me in the swirling chaos of intrigue. Our bond deepened with every shared glance, every wordless communication, until it became impossible to separate my own heartbeat from the golden pulse that tethered us. Yet danger was never far. During one midday audience, a platter of fruit was presented to me, a delicate slice of peach, glistening and fragrant. I hesitated, feeling an instinctive tremor along my spine. The moon-born blood within me flared faintly, warning of subtle poison. Velric's gaze caught mine across the chamber, and I felt the unspoken alarm rippling through our bond. My hand faltered, the fruit untouched, and a murmur of shock ran through the courtiers nearby. The Queen Mother's eyes had been on me, calm but calculating, and I realized that someone had attempted to strike at me, to test the depth of our vigilance, or perhaps to remove me entirely. Panic and adrenaline coursed through me as the realization settled. The palace was not merely a place of observation, it was a battlefield. A carefully orchestrated plot aimed to remove me from power, or worse, to claim my life.
My stomach twisted with fear, yet Vaelric's presence grounded me, the golden bond flaring in response to my rising anxiety. I met his eyes, and in them I saw both anger and resolve. He would not allow me to be harmed, not by politics, not by treachery, not by the hidden hands that sought to poison my ascent. The court buzzed with tension as I discreetly withdrew from the audience chamber, the silver sigils along my arms flaring to life, a silent warning and signal. Behind every corner lurked threat, behind every gilded tapestry, secrets. The palace whispered of betrayal, of envy, and of danger cloaked in opulence. I understood, more clearly than ever, that power in this place was never freely given, only seized and defended, and the moonborn magic within me was both a beacon and a target. That evening, the poisoning plot came to fruition, or at least its deception did. I collapsed suddenly during the Queen Mother's inspection of the newly trained guards, gasping for air as a cold wave of paralysis spread through my limbs. Courtiers screamed, clutching at me in alarm, while Violet's voice thundered above the chaos, his golden aura surging with protective fury. He swept through the crowd, ignoring startled faces, seeking the source of the attack. My vision blurred, but the bond remained, a tether of heat and energy keeping my awareness anchored. Someone had framed me. Of that I was certain. But the identity of the true assailant remained hidden beneath layers of lies. As I was hurriedly carried to the dungeon for supposed containment and questioning, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down. Chains clinked against stone, echoing in the cold, damp chamber, and I realized how vulnerable I had become, how much the palace's gilded walls could hide sinister intentions. Yet the forbidden spark, though tested by fear and pain, remained unbroken, a golden light in the darkness, pulsing with the promise that Vaelric would not abandon me. The dungeon was a place of shadows and silence, stone cold beneath my fingers as I leaned against the wall, trying to regain strength. The faint silver sigils on my arms glimmered in response to the tension, a subtle pulse of warming and defiance. Every whisper in the palace corridors, every footfall above, carried danger and intrigue. I realized with a chill that the Queen Mother's influence reached even here. No place was truly safe. Yet within the oppressive darkness, I clung to the golden tether connecting me to Vaelric. Each heartbeat, each shiver of air, each tremor of magic coursing through me resonated with his presence, a lifeline in a world intent on breaking me. I pressed my palms to the cold stone, focusing on the pull of our bond, drawing warmth and courage from the forbidden spark. The moonborn legacy within me stirred, subtle and potent, a power that responded to my fear, my determination, and my will to survive. I understood then that this trial was not merely physical confinement, but a test of spirit, endurance, and the depth of the connection that bound me to the king. Vaelric's arrival was sudden, silent, and impossible to ignore. Shadows shifted, and the soft click of armor reverberated against the stone walls. A surge of golden light filled the dungeon, warmth and fire pushing back the chill. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice both urgent and tender. The forbidden spark flared to life, illuminating the shadows and banishing fear for a fleeting moment. He traced a line along my arm with his fingertip, a gesture of both reassurance and power. "I will not allow them to claim you," he said, his gaze burning through the darkness. The plan was swift, precise, a mixture of stealth, magic, and brute force. Vaelric unlocked the heavy chains, his aura pulsing, golden threads weaving around my limbs, dissolving the constraints. Every step of the escape demanded focus, courage, and trust. The corridors were alive with danger, the palace alert to intrusion, yet the bond between us guided each movement. Every glance, every touch, every pulse of shared energy reinforced the forbidden spark, making it a weapon as vital as any blade or spell in the unfolding struggle. We moved like shadows through the labyrinthine halls, the golden bond between us a constant, reassuring presence. Courtiers and guards searched for me, their shouts echoing faintly in the distance. Yet Valeric's control over the space around us, subtle and relentless, kept us undetected. The forbidden spark surged with every touch, every near brush of fingers, every whispered instruction. I realized in that moment that the connection between us was not merely emotional, it was tactical, a form of communication more powerful than words, more potent than any spell. My senses sharpened, guided by both moonborn instinct and Valeric's proximity. We reached the private gardens, moonlight spilling over hedges and fountains, and for a heartbeat, the danger seemed suspended. Yet the threat was ever present, a living entity following our steps, whispering of vengeance, of capture, of failure. Still, we pressed onward, drawing courage from the bond, from the forbidden spark, from the knowledge that survival, freedom, and truth lay just beyond the palace walls. Outside the palace, the night air was crisp and brimming with the scent of pine and frost. Vialric led us through hidden paths, familiar to him alone, avoiding guards and patrols with uncanny precision. I felt every heartbeat as a drum of urgency, the golden threads of our bond flaring like twin beacons against the darkness. My body, though exhausted from confinement and fear, moved with an almost instinctive grace, guided by the legacy of the moon-born blood coursing through me. Every step we took was a negotiation with danger, a dance along the knife's edge of exposure and discovery. The forbidden spark pulsed with unspoken intensity, a living flame that spoke of trust, desire, and defiance. I realized then that the trials of the palace had prepared me for this moment, had sharpened my instincts and fortified my spirit. Each shadow became an ally, each whisper of wind a guide, and each pulse of Vialric's presence a shield against unseen threats. We paused at the edge of the forest surrounding the palace, the moonlight catching the frost on the branches, turning the landscape into a glittering sea of silver. Vaelric turned to me, his face illuminated, eyes reflecting both concern and something deeper, more intimate. "You have faced the palace," he said softly, voice carrying the weight of command and tenderness. "But the world beyond it is no gentler. You must trust the bond, trust yourself, and trust that the Moonborn legacy will protect you when I cannot be at your side." The forbidden spark surged, a living heat between us, making it impossible to ignore the pull of desire mingled with danger. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, feeling the threads of energy weaving through us, solidifying our connection. Every instinct screamed to hold him, to cling to the fire of what we shared. Yet the knowledge of enemies, of treachery, and of the stakes forced restraint. We were fugitives now, not merely lovers, not merely allies, but partners in survival and in rebellion against the palace's unseen chains. As we moved deeper into the forest, the palace receding into the distance, I felt a strange mixture of relief and trepidation. The golden threads pulsed steadily, a rhythm of reassurance amidst uncertainty. Valric's presence remained a constant, a tether to safety and understanding. My mind replayed the lessons, the tests, the treacheries I had endured. I realized that the true danger of the palace was not in open hostility, but in its subtle manipulations, the unseen daggers, the whispered threats, the veiled curses that could strike when least expected. Each moment of escape heightened my awareness, sharpened my senses, and illuminated the depth of the forbidden spark. The moon-born blood within me hummed with power, responding instinctively to threat, danger, and the nearness of Valric. It was a pulse that was both weapon and shield, desire and restraint, fire and anchor. I understood that we were no longer merely playing the games of the palace. We were shaping our own destiny, forging a path through peril that would define both our bond and the unfolding legacy of my bloodline. The first hints of dawn crept through the trees as we reached a hidden glade. Frost sparkled like diamonds on every leaf, the air crisp and biting, yet infused with the scent of pine, moss, and the distant earth. Vialric stopped, turning to face me fully, the forbidden spark burning between us like a living entity. "Here, for a moment," he whispered. "We can breathe. We can remember who we are beyond the walls, beyond the chains, beyond the whispers." I felt my body relax slightly, the tension melting even as the golden threads of the bond continued to hum with life. The world of intrigue, danger, and expectation faded, replaced by the purity of shared presence, the quiet acknowledgement of what we had endured together. My heart, though still racing from the escape, softened into something tender, fierce, and irrevocable. The moon-born magic within me pulsed in harmony with his aura, an unspoken declaration of power, trust, and passion. It was a moment both fleeting and eternal, a reminder of why the palace's trials had mattered, why the forbidden spark could not be extinguished, and why destiny had placed us on this path together. Valric reached out, brushing frost from my cloak and tucking stray hair behind my ear, gestures intimate yet charged with unspoken meaning. The golden threads of the bond pulsed brighter, responding to proximity, touch, and the unrelenting pull of the forbidden spark. I leaned into him instinctively, feeling both protection and desire, knowing that in this fragile moment of safety, we had claimed something more than survival. The moon-born energy within me flared subtly, a reaction to the warmth of his touch, the presence of his aura, and the knowledge that we had overcome not only treachery, but the weight of history, expectation, and lineage. Even as the forest whispered around us, promising both freedom and challenge, I understood that the palace, with all its grandeur and danger, had forged a new strength in me, a strength inseparable from the forbidden connection, from the bond that tethered our souls across danger, desire, and destiny. Every heartbeat resonated with him. Every pulse of golden energy spoke of trust, power, and a shared purpose that could not be denied. The sun rose fully as we finally emerged from the forest's shadow, the palace no longer looming, yet its trials etched into memory and sinew. Valric held my hand, the forbidden spark simmering between us, tempered now by survival, trust, and shared purpose. I felt the full weight of my heritage, the sacrifices of my mother, and the strength of the moonborn legacy flowing through me, alive and potent. The palace, the Queen Mother, the whispers and the poisonings had tested us, yet we had prevailed, bound by golden threads and a fire that could not be quenched. The Lyric's gaze held mine, conveying unspoken promises of protection, devotion, and a defiance against any who would dare to challenge us. I knew then that the journey was far from over. The palace, the crown, and the shadows of our past still loomed, but we had discovered something stronger than fear or treachery, an unbreakable bond, a forbidden spark, and a shared destiny that would guide us through trials, danger, and desire alike. Together, we stepped forward into the uncertain dawn, alive, unbroken, and united in ways the palace could never understand. The days following our escape passed in a tense blur of preparation, secrecy, and whispered strategies. Valric and I had retreated to a hidden estate in the northern woods, a fortress concealed beneath towering pines and shrouded in veils of protective magic. The golden threads of our bond pulsed steadily, a quiet, intimate rhythm amidst the constant planning for what we both knew was inevitable. Every sunrise carried the weight of approaching confrontation, the knowledge that the palace's shadows had not forgotten, that Maressa's treachery had only grown bolder in our absence. We pored over maps, ancient texts, and whispered intelligence from loyal servants, uncovering hints of alliances I had never imagined. My moonborn power throbbed beneath my skin, a steady reminder of the legacy I carried, a power that had lain dormant until necessity forced it awake. Each practice session, each whispered discussion, was a careful preparation not merely for battle, but for the revelation of truths long buried. The stepmother's dark ambitions, her secret dealings with mercenaries and rogue mages, and the countless lives she had manipulated to serve her ends. Valric's hands brushed mine as we plotted, the forbidden spark between us flaring with shared anticipation and simmering desire. Even as the cold wind bit at our skin and frost clung to the pines, we found warmth in each other, in the knowledge that we would face what was coming together. I realized, in that quiet, tense intimacy, that the coming war would not merely test our bodies or our skill, but the strength of the bond that tethered us across danger, desire, and destiny.
Rumors reached us of Maressa's full mobilization, agents of the crown aligned with the Queen Mother, masked in loyalty but driven by greed and fear, moving in shadowed synchrony with the stepmother's designs. My stomach tightened as I felt the moonborn pulse stir within me, a premonition of fire and blood, of the chaos that would erupt beneath the coming moon. Valric and I moved through the forest at dawn, silent as the frost that lay across the ground, eyes sharp for signs of pursuit or betrayal. Every step carried a tension beyond mere caution. It was a rhythm of survival, the measured heartbeat of those who know the world seeks to destroy what it fears. I traced the golden threads of our bond, letting them guide me, reassure me, and bind my focus to the task ahead. Even as we approached the boundary of the estate, a hidden ridge overlooking the palace and surrounding lands, the wind seemed to whisper warnings in the branches above. I felt the pulse of my magic respond instinctively to the rising threat, veins humming with energy, every nerve alive with anticipation. Valric's presence at my side anchored me, a tether against fear, a reminder that whatever awaited, we would face it together. The first signs of the blood moon were faint on the horizon, a crimson hue bleeding into the edge of night, and with it came the weight of destiny, the inevitability of confrontation, and the unrelenting whisper that our power, our bond, and our courage would be tested as never before. As the sun fell and the first red light of the blood moon crept across the horizon, scouts reported movement within the palace walls, figures cloaked in shadow, bearing banners of the stepmother's secret alliance. My pulse quickened, the moonborn energy rising in response to imminent threat. An instinctive symphony of magic, fear, and anticipation. Valric tightened his grip on my hand, the forbidden spark flaring in tandem with the moon's rising blood hue, a pulse that resonated through both our bodies and our souls. We stood on the ridge, the forest around us a silent witness, and I could see the dark silhouettes of soldiers, mages, and assassins aligning for what could only be described as a siege of both body and spirit. I inhaled sharply, tasting the crisp night air tinged with pine, frost, and the metallic scent of coming conflict, feeling my bloodlines stir with anticipation and readiness. Valric's voice was low, intimate yet commanding,
his words weaving through the threads of our bond. "We end this tonight, Alara. The palace, the lies, the treachery, they will all burn beneath the blood moon." I nodded, letting my resolve solidify, letting the moonborn energy swell within me, my silver sigils pulsing faintly, reflecting the crimson light. The forbidden spark between us was no longer merely desire or defiance. It had transformed into strategy, a silent, powerful language of intent and survival. Every sense sharpened, every heartbeat aligned with the coming storm, and the world seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the war that would change everything. The first strike came with silent precision. Shadowed figures emerged from the palace's eastern wall, cloaked in black, their movements unnervingly coordinated. I felt the moonborn magic react instinctively, energy rippling along my veins, the forbidden spark flaring like twin suns within my chest. Valkyric moved beside me, a silent phantom of strength and power, eyes glowing gold beneath the crimson light. He guided my hand to the hilt of a sword etched with protective runes, the blade humming faintly, as if recognizing the bloodline that wielded it. We descended from the ridge into the open field beyond the palace, moving with the fluid grace of hunters, each step measured, each breath in sync. The sound of approaching footsteps, the shuffle of armor, and the faint crackle of magic warned of the imminent clash. I felt a thrill of fear and exhilaration coiling in my stomach, a tension that sharpened my focus and fed the moonborn energy coursing through my body. Every glance at Valkyric conveyed a cascade of instructions and strategies without a single word, the bond now a battlefield language as potent as any spell or blade. My pulse matched the rhythm of the attacking forces, a living metronome of magic, desire, and danger. I realized that the blood moon had transformed the landscape, not only illuminating our enemies, but igniting the dormant fire of legacy, power, and vengeance within me. The clash was immediate. Steel rang against steel, magic erupted in arcs of light and shadow, and the cold night air was pierced by the screams of both courage and terror. Vielric moved beside me with lethal precision, his aura flaring golden against the deep crimson sky, guiding, protecting, and striking in perfect harmony. I felt the moonborn energy surge, my silver sigils glowing, responding to threat, danger, and instinct alike. Every strike I made carried more than physical force. It was the manifestation of lineage, of the sacrifices made by my mother, of the hidden power coursing in my veins. The forbidden spark between us guided our coordination, allowing seamless communication without words, a silent symphony of battle instincts intertwined with desire and trust. Each enemy that fell brought both relief and heightened alertness, as we knew the Stepmother's forces were cunning and relentless, their strategies as poisonous as the corridors of the palace we had escaped. Blood and frost mingled on the battlefield, painting a canvas of chaos and fury, yet within the storm, Vielric's presence anchored me, a constant tether, a flame in the darkness, and a reminder that the moonborn legacy could not be broken. As the battle unfolded beneath the blood moon, whispers of betrayal surfaced from unexpected quarters. Soldiers turned against one another, influenced by the Stepmother's dark enchantments, and rogue mages attempted to disrupt our formation with bursts of destructive magic. My instincts, amplified by moonborn heritage, guided me past traps, wards, and deceitful illusions. Every motion, every decision was heightened, tempered by years of palace observation, by training, by survival. I could feel Vaelric's energy, the forbidden spark pulsing in tandem with mine, a conduit of strength, clarity, and rage against injustice. The crimson light painted the landscape in shades of fire and shadow, reflecting against the silver sigils along my arms, each flicker a warning, a signal, and a weapon. Courtiers and agents who had once smiled with false warmth now found themselves swept into the tide of chaos, their schemes unraveling beneath the raw force of magic and determination. I realized with a surge of power that tonight was not simply a confrontation. It was a reckoning, a purging of lies, a release of pent-up betrayal, and the full awakening of the Moonborn legacy in a blaze of fire, ice, and silver light. Valric and I carved a path through the forces aligned against us, the golden threads of our bond guiding movement, intuition, and strategy. My stepmother's emissaries fell one by one, caught unprepared by the sudden emergence of powers they had underestimated. I unleashed bursts of moonborn magic with careful control, each pulse precise, devastating, yet intertwined with subtle restraint to protect the innocents caught in the chaos. The forbidden spark between us flared with every movement, every shared glance, every tactile connection, translating desire and intent into battlefield advantage. We moved as one, a force shaped by love, trust, vengeance, and the fire of our lineage. The blood moon above mirrored the intensity of our resolve, bathing the field in red and gold, casting long shadows that shifted with every pulse of energy, every swing of the blade, every spell cast with both precision and wrath. The palace walls, once symbols of danger and intrigue, now served as silent witnesses to our awakening, the culmination of a legacy hidden for generations, but now blazing openly under the celestial witness of the crimson moon. In the midst of the battle, my stepmother herself emerged, her presence commanding and malevolent, cloaked in robes that shimmered like spilled shadow. Her eyes locked on mine, and I felt the weight of history and betrayal press against my chest. Valeric's grip on my arm tightened, grounding me, and the golden bond surged, a conduit of strength and focus. I met her gaze steadily, letting the Moonborn power swell in response, acknowledging the legacy she had sought to erase, the lineage she had tried to suppress. She unleashed a torrent of dark energy, a swirl of poison and flame, yet instinct and power guided me, Valeric beside me as a shield and partner. Every strike, every pulse of magic was informed by centuries of ancestral knowledge, every movement and expression of the forbidden spark, of desire fused with survival. The battlefield seemed suspended in a moment where time itself bent to the clash of blood, magic, and destiny. And in that suspended instant, I understood the full weight of the Moonborn power, raw, ancient, beautiful, and unstoppable when embraced fully. I raised my hands to the sky, feeling the Moonborn power surge like liquid silver, responding to the blood moon's crimson illumination. Energy coiled around me, threads of magic weaving into a tapestry of destruction and protection, fire and frost, wrath and clarity. Valric mirrored my movements, his aura golden and unyielding, our forbidden spark now a tangible force, communicating with every flicker of light, every brush of fingers, every shared heartbeat. The stepmother's attacks grew desperate, her magic lashing outward. Yet each attempt was met with resistance, parried not merely by skill, but by the ancestral legacy coursing in my veins. The battlefield shook, trees snapping, stones cracking, as if the very land responded to the celestial and mystical forces now fully awakened. Courtiers and soldiers alike were swept into awe and terror, caught between survival instinct and reverent fear of the power unleashed. I realized then that the blood moon had not merely illuminated the night, it had unlocked a destiny that had waited for centuries to rise, to judge, and to claim its rightful authority.
Valeric and I pressed forward, moving as one through the chaos, every step guided by the forbidden spark, every decision a balance of power, strategy, and survival. The stepmother's magic fragmented under the combined force of our bond and my moonborn energy, her allies falling back in disarray, unable to withstand the onslaught. I unleashed a controlled eruption of power, light and shadow intertwining, each pulse resonating with my lineage, sending enemies staggering, their intentions and conspiracies unraveling beneath the raw force of heritage and resolve. Valeric's hand brushed mine in mid-motion, a fleeting, intimate contact amidst carnage and fury, reminding me that our bond was not merely survival, it was a connection that transformed, elevated, and guided. Every heartbeat, every flare of magic, every breath was a reminder of the power we wielded not just as individuals, but together as embodiments of love, vengeance, and legacy under the red glare of the blood moon. The battlefield lay silent in the aftermath, the blood moon receding behind the horizon, leaving a sky bruised with fading red and gold. Smoke curled lazily from the shattered gates of the palace, mingling with the frost-bitten air, carrying the scent of fire, blood, and something older, something sacred. My chest heaved with exhaustion, my moonborn energy flickering like embers in the cold dawn, still tethered to Valeric, whose golden aura shimmered beside me. Every limb ached from battle, yet I felt the pulse of something greater, the resonance of legacy, of survival, of promises yet unspoken. We moved cautiously among the fallen, eyes scanning for threats that had surely not been fully eradicated, the whispers of treachery still lingering like ghosts among the corpses and rubble. Valeric's hand brushed mine as we stepped through a broken archway, the contact intimate, familiar, yet fraught with unspoken emotion. The forbidden spark, though dampened by fatigue, pulsed softly between us, a subtle reminder of desire restrained, of shared survival, and of the inevitability of what had begun under the blood moon. I realized in that quiet tension that victory was not merely about defeating the stepmother. It was about reclaiming our future, our lives, and the possibility of a love neither danger nor legacy could suppress. But the reprieve was fleeting. Amidst the ruins of shattered armor and shattered dreams, a new horror revealed itself. Valeric, my closest confidant, my heart tethered in ways words could not describe, lay crumpled beneath the fallen battlements, dark blood seeping through the intricate folds of his battle robes. Time slowed, the world narrowing to the crimson stain on the frozen earth, the shallow rise and fall of his chest, and the golden threads of my bond quivering with alarm and fear. I dropped to my knees beside him, hands trembling as I placed them over the wound, the moonborn energy within me thrumming desperately, searching, reaching, yearning. Valeric knelt beside me, his eyes locked on mine with raw, unspoken grief, the forbidden spark flaring with urgency as it mirrored the chaos in our hearts. Every instinct screamed at me to save him, to summon the full force of my legacy, yet a part of me knew the cost could be unbearable. The frost of dawn bit at our skin, yet heat radiated from the pulse of shared despair. The tension of love and fear braided together like golden threads around my chest. I whispered his name, the syllables trembling with emotion, each one a lifeline, a plea, a promise that I would not let him slip from the world I had fought so hard to reclaim. Valeric's hand rested on my shoulder, steadying me, yet the white in his gaze conveyed the unthinkable. He could not intervene. My hands glowed faintly with silver light, sigils of moonborn power awakening beneath my fingertips as I pressed them closer to Valeric's chest, willing magic to flow, to repair,
to reclaim. But the depth of the wound, the complexity of his fate, resisted even the ancient energy pulsing through my veins. My throat tightened, and I felt tears prickle unbidden. The forbidden spark between Valeric and me, now a mirror of the heart-wrenching choice before me. The battlefield seemed to blur, sounds fading, the clash of past moments reduced to a hum beneath the roar of destiny. I realized then that this moment required the ultimate sacrifice, to channel every shard of my moonborn power, to risk everything, to surrender the legacy that had sustained me for centuries in order to restore the life of someone I could not bear to lose. Valeric's lips barely whispered, "Alara, if you do this, there's no turning back." Yet in his eyes, I saw trust, devotion, and the unyielding tether of our bond, giving me courage even as dread coiled in my stomach like a living thing. I drew a deep breath, feeling the moonborn magic swell to its fullest, an inferno of silver light entwined with crimson streaks, pulsing like the heartbeat of the blood moon itself. Valeric's golden aura flared in response, wrapping around me like a shield, a conduit, a reminder that I would not face this alone. The frost beneath my knees melted beneath the heat of energy, the cold air trembling with raw, unrestrained power. I pressed my hands fully to Valeric's chest, my pulse and breath merging with the surge of magic, feeling every thread of his life flicker and falter beneath my touch. I could sense the delicate balance between revival and destruction, the edge of consequence sharp enough to sever the bond I had fought so hard to preserve. Yet love, grief, and necessity were stronger than hesitation. I whispered words older than the palace itself, incantations of restoration, of life, of the sacred and forbidden legacy of the moonborn flowing into the mortal frame before me. The silver threads braided with golden light, binding, mending, transforming, and the forbidden spark pulsed in tandem, both warning and urging, an intimate dance of trust, power, and devotion. Valeric's body shuddered under the wave of magic, the darkness of death trembling against the inflow of moonborn energy. I felt each gasp, each falter, each flicker of life as a delicate symphony of responsibility and fear. Valeric's hand brushed mine, guiding the channel of power, sharing the burden, the intensity, the near unbearable weight of love, loyalty, and longing. The forbidden spark flared, scorching the space between us, a mixture of heat and connection, desire restrained by desperation, passion sharpened by loss. My chest burned, my limbs shook, and yet I held fast, feeling every thread of life entwined with mine, a tapestry of past sacrifices, battles fought, and futures reclaimed. Each heartbeat of Valeric's returned to the rhythm of the moonborn legacy, each flicker of light a promise that love, even at great cost, would endure. The forest, the palace ruins, and the morning sky seemed to pause, as if holding its breath to witness the unfolding miracle of revival and sacrifice. Finally, a shudder of movement rippled through Valeric's chest, his eyelids fluttering, catching the light of the rising sun, the blood moon's residual crimson fading into dawn. I gasped, relief and exhaustion colliding violently, tears spilling freely as the realization sank in. He lived. Valeric exhaled beside me, golden threads shimmering faintly with unspent energy, his face a mixture of awe, pride, and unspoken longing. The forbidden spark, though dulled slightly by the magnitude of sacrifice, remained vibrant, tethering our emotions, our desires, our victories and defeats in a single golden current. Valeric's eyes opened fully, locking onto mine with bewilderment, recognition, and an unspoken gratitude that made my heart ache with a mixture of joy and lingering fear. The weight of what had been given, what had been surrendered, hung between us, palpable, sacred, terrifying, and beautiful. I understood, in that moment, the magnitude of the moon-born power I carried, the depth of the bond I shared with Valeric, and the permanence of the choice that had reshaped destiny itself. Valeric's hand lingered at the small of my back, steadying, grounding, guiding, yet every brush of his fingers ignited the forbidden spark anew, a mixture of relief, desire, and unacknowledged longing. Valeric, now conscious, shifted slightly, the pulse of life returning fully, unaware of the full cost that had been paid for his revival. I felt the echoes of my power dissipate, silver sigils dimming as the moon-born legacy I had wielded so fully was relinquished to restore him. The loss was a quiet ache beneath the triumph, a reminder that power could be both a gift and a weight, a flame that could burn both self and world if mismanaged. Yet in the golden threads binding Valeric and me, I found solace, intimacy, and the quiet heat of desire tempered by shared survival. The frost around us began to melt in the early sun, as if the land itself acknowledged the end of conflict and the beginning of restoration. I realized that what we had endured, the battles, the betrayals, the sacrifices, had forged something deeper than love or loyalty, a connection intertwined with legacy, courage, and the irrevocable act of giving everything for another. Valric's voice, faint but clear, broke the delicate silence. "Ilara," he murmured, the single word carrying more weight than all the accolades, threats, or battles before. My pulse stuttered, and I leaned closer, relief and tenderness warring with residual exhaustion and the forbidden spark that pulsed insistently. Valric's eyes never left mine, reading, understanding, guiding without intrusion, the bond between us a silent conversation of touch, glance, and shared breath. The warmth of the morning sun mixed with the heat of lingering battle and passion, casting shadows and light that danced across our forms. I felt the subtle ache of power relinquished, yet the fullness of human and magical connection made the sacrifice absolute and just. Valric's hand reached for mine instinctually, his gratitude and confusion mirrored in every tremor of touch. I squeezed gently, signaling reassurance, understanding, and the unspoken truth that some sacrifices, though painful, are necessary for love to endure, for life to flourish, for destiny to complete its cycle. The forest around us exhaled a slow golden sigh as the frost melted, birds tentatively stirring, the first rays of sun igniting dew on leaves and branches. I felt the absence of my moonborn power keenly, yet the resonance of lineage lingered faintly, like an echo or a promise, a tether connecting past, present, and future. Valeric drew a slow breath, his golden threads entwining with mine, a subtle, intimate affirmation of survival, love, and the shared burdens we had carried. The forbidden spark, though softened by the release of energy, hummed beneath the surface, a latent current of desire, trust, and unacknowledged yearning. I realized that the act of saving Valric, though draining my power, had cemented bonds not only of life, but of emotion, of choice, of shared destiny that would forever define our connection. The air carried a fragrance of pine, earth, and something undefinable, a scent that spoke of endings, beginnings, and the quiet triumph of hearts intertwined by trials and courage alike. Valric stepped closer, his presence both grounding and inflaming. the golden aura faint yet warm around us, a reminder of shared survival and mutual devotion. His lips brushed against my temple, fleeting, tender, intimate, sending a jolt of awareness and restrained desire through me. The forbidden spark leapt in response, a subtle blaze tempered by exhaustion and joy. The tension between us heightened by the unspoken acknowledgement of what had been risked and what remained unclaimed. I leaned slightly into him, drawing comfort and heat, knowing that the battlefield had changed not just the world outside, but the delicate landscape of our hearts. Every glance between us carried centuries of unvoiced longing. Every brush of hands was a dialogue, and every beat of our hearts intertwined in a cadence forged under fire, moonlight, and the irrevocable choices we had made. I understood that our bond, though tempered by exhaustion and necessity, had emerged unbreakable, a luminous thread through danger, desire, and the quiet ache of restraint. Valric, now steady, pushed himself fully upright, though his movements were tentative, fragile, yet infused with the gratitude of someone reborn. He looked between Valric and me, a question lingering unspoken in his gaze. I smiled softly, exhaustion mingling with relief and a subtle pride, the knowledge that what I had given, my power, my energy, my connection, had saved life, restored balance, and affirmed choice. Valric's eyes met mine, golden and unwavering, and the forbidden spark pulsed, no longer solely desire, but a testament to endurance, love, and shared purpose. The three of us stood amidst the battlefield, the ruins of palace walls and frost-tinged earth a reminder of trials faced and lessons learned. And in the quiet aftermath, I understood that power, though fleeting, was meaningful only when paired with love, courage, and sacrifice. The Moonborn legacy, though relinquished, had completed its purpose, leaving behind a connection more profound than any spell, any sword, or any magic could achieve. I turned to Valric fully, hands entwined, breaths mingling, the morning sun casting warm light over the frozen remnants of the blood moon's shadow. The forbidden spark flared faintly, no longer a blaze of tension, but a gentle flame of unspoken emotion, a rhythm that spoke of connection deeper than mere survival or shared battle. "We've survived," I murmured, voice hoarse but sincere, "and I think, perhaps we've truly begun." His lips curved in a slow, understanding smile, the golden aura wrapping around us both, a cocoon of trust, desire, and unspoken promise. The battlefield was no longer a place of fear, but of clarity, a testament to what could be achieved through courage, connection, and sacrifice. I realized then that love, though complicated, dangerous, and often restrained, could flourish even amidst ruin, even amidst legacy, even amidst the ghosts of battles past. Valric's presence remained a silent heartbeat behind us, a reminder of life restored, of sacrifice rewarded, and of the fragile balance between power and humanity. He stepped back, allowing Valric and me to share a moment no longer burdened solely by strategy or survival. The wind stirred the remnants of frost and ash, carrying the faint scent of pine, earth, and victory. Valric's hand covered mine, fingers lacing, and the golden threads pulsed once more with unspoken words, emotions, and the slow burn of desire tempered by respect and endurance. I felt the ache of what I had relinquished, yet it was a gentle, necessary ache, one that affirmed the choice I had made and the love that could now grow unbound by fear. The sky above brightened, pale gold spilling across frost-kissed branches, reflecting on silver sigils still faintly etched along my skin. A final, delicate echo of moonborn heritage, a gentle testament to the trials we had endured and the life we had reclaimed. As we began our walk back toward the remnants of the estate, Valeric's presence remained a tether, a warmth, a quiet insistence of shared breath, shared heartbeat, shared survival. Each step carried the weight of the night's revelations, of sacrifices made, of powers relinquished, yet also the intoxicating promise of what could come. The forbidden spark lingered, an ember glowing quietly beneath our joined palms, hinting at desire restrained but not diminished, intimacy nurtured amidst chaos. Valeric walked slightly ahead, recovering, yet every glance he cast backward reminded me of the stakes, the preciousness of life, and the fragility of balance. I understood with a sudden, visceral clarity that what I had done, what I had given, was more than magic. It was a declaration of love, trust, and the intertwining of hearts beyond duty or fear. Valeric's lips brushed my hair once more, gentle, deliberate, intimate, and I felt the quiet stirrings of a love that had endured trials beyond imagination, now free to exist, albeit cautiously, in the light of dawn. Finally, we reached the glade where our exile had first begun, the trees still heavy with frost, sunlight scattering diamonds across the ground. I paused, letting the moment breathe, letting the weight of victory, sacrifice, and survival settle within me. Valeric took my hands fully in his, the forbidden spark now a steady flame, no longer urgent, no longer fleeting, but a promise woven into the quiet fabric of our existence. I glanced at Valeric, alive, restored, a living testament to the cost and power of love, legacy, and sacrifice. And in that moment, the truth crystallized. All the hiding, all the secrets, all the shadows of the past had led to this, a reclamation of life, love, and destiny. I whispered softly, more to the wind than anyone else, "You were hidden, so I could find you." The words lingered, echoing through the frost-laden branches, over the thawing earth, across the battlefield-turned sanctuary, and into the hearts of those who would remember not the blood, but the courage, the love, and the chosen queen who had sacrificed everything to restore hope, life, and the enduring promise of the moon-born legacy.